Good afternoon. We will be talking today about how to increase productivity on image retouching and how to improve image quality with Claro Premedia Server. So talking about Claro Premedia, before we do that, we go in a little bit of history of Elpical. Elpical was founded in 1997. With its roots in the Hasselblad electronic imaging division, and has been, founded as a result of a management buyout as part of that the split off of that division. Elpical and the underlying electronic imaging division has been involved in digital imaging techniques since 1980. Since the 80s, and the company has offices in the Netherlands and in Germany. Claro is being used by customers around the globe in different markets, but mainly in the publishing market, primarily in newspaper publishing, but also in magazine publishing, and additionally in catalog publishing and in specific segments of the digital print markets, more specifically in the photo book printing market. The company is a relatively small company, yet very innovative and also flexible, with a eagerness to listen to the needs of its customers and the willingness to adapt to those needs. That flexibility we have seen is important to be able to adapt to the specific market and customer needs. We, 4Ps, as a distributor, have been involved with Elpical since 2007 and have been acting as an international distributor, working both with resellers around the world to distribute the Elpical products in the different countries, as with specific key accounts. The Claro technology is important to understand, and we will obviously go into more details during the demo. But when we talk about image optimization, it is important to understand that the image optimization that Claro performs is an image optimization based on a thorough analysis of the image. All aspects of the image are taken into account. So the analysis is performed on pixel data, but also on metadata, such as EXIF information or other metadata that can be contained in the image. The optimization is a dynamic optimization as a result of that analysis. And to better understand that is that in the settings that we will go through later on, what you set is a quality that you want to achieve for the images. Depending on the original quality of the image and based on the analysis of the image, one image will be corrected more drastically than the other. Once again, if the original quality of the image is already relatively good, then obviously the software will be less aggressive in its correction than when we have a really bad quality of the image. The goal, therefore, is to improve the quality of the image, but also to standardize it so that there is a similar look and feel, a similar atmosphere to images that will appear in the same publication, on the same page, in the same catalog, etc. One of the other elements that is important in the use of the technology that is that Claro will also automatically detect problem images. So there is a sort of pre-flight that will be performed on the image, looking at the original quality of the image and also looking at the desired quality of the image. Should the software feel that it is unable to correct the images in the way that it has been defined in the settings, then those images can be rerouted to an image operator for him or her to have a look at those images and to potentially perform additional corrections on that. Therefore, it is also important to understand, and that was specifically mentioned as part of the title of this webinar, that obviously we are looking at automatic enhancement of images, and that the automation part is a crucial aspect of that. But we also realize that not all images can necessarily be corrected automatically, and that might not even be a goal in every environment to do that. However, performance optimization and therefore increasing the amount of images that can be treated by a limited amount of people, that is also one of the additional goals in addition to the actual quality improvement that is happening by processing the images through Claro. If you look at the product, it is obviously a server application that has a web-based interface and that uses hot folders to process the images. You can set up automatic or semi-automatic workflows, and this is something that was mentioned earlier. You can either reroute bad quality images, really bad quality images, to an image operator, but you could also choose to have all images that are being processed by Claro to be rerouted to an image operator to have a human eye inspect the optimizations that have been done by the software. In order to do that, the software ties in very closely with Photoshop, and we will see during the demo how that is done. But there is also an integration with Adobe InDesign, where images that are placed in a layout can be directly sent to Claro for optimization and can then be updated after optimization. From a performance point of view, Claro is multiprocessor aware. One license will support 4 concurrent image processes. So there is a significant performance on modern infrastructure. And from an integration point of view, Claro has a very flexible and open interface that will allow integration with either editorial systems or digital asset management systems through XML or web services. From a redundancy point of view and also from a performance point of view, there can be automatic load balancing and failover. That means that if multiple instances of Claro are installed across the network, the load can be balanced between those instances, and should one of the instances fail, the second or additional ones can take over if needed. I briefly mentioned the Photoshop Inspector. The Photoshop Inspector is a small client application. It is not a plugin for Photoshop, but it communicates with Photoshop. And it allows the image operator to approve an image or to perform additional corrections on an image. Here I come back to an overall productivity increase when it comes to image retouching, while the goal of the software obviously is to do as good a job as possible in correcting the image. An additional goal is obviously to increase the performance of the image operator by performing a number of potentially repetitive tasks, such as the application of unsharp masking, color conversions, etc. It can be used for fully automated workflows, but also for those higher quality environments where specific corrections might require the intervention of an image operator. The Photoshop inspector fully allows to do that and still take advantage of the productivity increase that you will get by taking in charge the repetitive tasks that an operator will need to do. As I said, the operator can intervene on the optimized image and perform additional corrections on that. And after that, send it back into the workflow, including the corrections that were done in Photoshop. Here we see a short example of what the Photoshop inspector looks like. So there is a small application that sits on top of the user interface, and you will get a side-by-side comparison in Photoshop showing the original image and showing the processed image on the right-hand side. We feel that this approach really allows to take full advantage of Photoshop and of the software and of Claro itself. Other solutions might have side-by-side comparison showing the original and showing the processed image as well. However, the approach by integrating that into Photoshop really allows you to have access to all the tools that you will find in Photoshop to potentially perform additional corrections to the images that you receive. The InDesign job client, as I also briefly mentioned before, allows you to submit images to Claro from within your InDesign documents. Claro can crop and resample and enhance the images based on the place that these images take in the page layout. It will allow to fit the images into the image box, and it will increase the quality and potentially reduce the file size, because if only a small image, a small part of the image is being used in the actual image box, then cropping can be applied to those images, reducing the overall file size of the publication. And here we see a screenshot of what the job client in InDesign looks like. Once again, we'll have a closer look at that feature during the demo. In addition to pure image processing, Elpical Claro can also be used and as for routing images. So it has, in addition to the core image processing capabilities, it also has some workflow capabilities. Not only the workflow capabilities when it comes to rerouting the images to an operator or sending them directly from within the design, but it has also those automated routing channels, which will allow you to create one-to-many workflows, so where you could reroute images based on their origin, the metadata, some of the technicalities such as the color space, etc., to a specific channel for processing. So those workflow capabilities are very important as well. When it comes to supported file formats, all common image file formats are supported. That means that JPEG images, TIFF images, GIF images are all supported. There's also extensive RAW file format support. And there is support for multi-layered images. Here in the presentation, it mentions the Photoshop PSD file format, but as you will probably know, also TIFF supports multi-layered images, and that is also supported. Once again, I'll get into a little bit more detail about the multi-layer support during the demo. Images in PDF files can actually also be processed. So you can process entire PDF documents with Claro. Important with that, as mentioned here in the presentation, is that those are unflattened PDF documents. Transparency flattening and flattening in general, specifically if text and transparency is used on top of images, will actually chop up the images in different individual images, which obviously will not work if it comes to image enhancement, because those chopped up images will all be processed individually. Therefore, if you are processing PDF documents, those PDFs need to be unflattened PDF files. We have some examples here, but I would much rather go to additional examples during the demo. If we look at the different markets, it is, as I mentioned, publishers both in the newspaper market as in the magazine market that can take use of the software and of Claro. Obviously, the more images that need to be treated, or the shorter the deadline for the images to be processed, the more relevant the application becomes. But as we see more and more a reduction in the amount of staff that there is available to treat images, we also see an increasing amount of customers looking at solutions like Claro, even if they have lower amounts of images that need to be processed. The digital printers, specifically the ones that are in image-heavy environments, such as postcard printers, photo book printers, calendar printers, the increasing amount of web-to-print print shops that will consume those products with a large amount of images to be treated are certainly potential customers for that, and we have references in that market. And then pre-press service bureaus and ad agencies that are dealing with a large amount of images are obviously also target customers for this solution. Elpical has also a tendency of being quite modest when it comes to the performance of the software. However, I think that the first line here mentioning that the software is at least as good as the best competitors when it comes to image quality would be an understatement. In the many comparisons that we have with potential prospects, we see that from an image quality point of view, the Claro Premedia product comes out mostly as the best, if not one of the best, on par with the second competitor out there. So from a quality point of view, I think it will be difficult to find much better on the market. If then you look at other unique selling points, the fact that it has an HTML user interface so that it is easy to configure from any workstation on the network, the fact that it has the Photoshop inspector for side-by-side comparison and additional correction directly within Photoshop, the fact that you can send files directly from within InDesign to Claro Premedia makes it a very complete solution and makes it have all those additional benefits to further increase the performance of your production. With the XML and web services APIs that I mentioned earlier, it makes it very easy to integrate in any kind of third-party solution. We know that technology today never stands alone, and that it always needs to interact with other parts and other systems in the workflow. There are already a number of existing integrations with publishing systems, whether those are Woodwing, Vune, or some of the more newspaper-oriented publishing systems. But basically, through the XML and web services APIs, you can integrate Elpical in any third-party system that would have the support for such an interface. And we see that most of the systems today have one or the other integration capability. Obviously, the load balancing and automatic failover options in high volume and mission critical production are very important elements. And the last, but certainly not the least consideration in the current economic climate is the price. Elpical Claro is the least expensive product for the quality and performance that you get on the market today. When it comes to publishing, obviously the advantages are most definitely the workflow. We see that every publisher has somewhat of a unique environment and a unique way of dealing with their workflow and specifically their images. Some companies will want to perform image optimization at the very beginning of the workflow at reception. Others will want to integrate the image optimization workflow with their editorial workflow, allowing people to send images from within the page layout, from within the editorial system to the image processing department. And others will actually want to postpone the image processing to the very end of the process when a PDF has been created and when they're starting to prepare the entire file ready for production. All of that is possible with Elpical Claro, and we even see that some companies will use a combination of either one of those options, sometimes performing a base optimization at image reception and then further finalizing the image either in the editorial workflow or at the very end of that. What we see is that image retouching time is being reduced by 50 to 100%. When we say 50 to 100%, that really depends on the quality of the images that people are dealing with, B, the type of publication and the type of environment that they are working in. We see people, for instance, in a photo book environment not touching any image anymore, or in some general newspaper environments not touching the image anymore, handing everything over to the software. But we have also higher quality magazines or catalogs where people will still look at the images, but still significantly reduce the time that is being spent on retouching the jobs. Obviously, that goes for the printing companies as well. However, with printing companies, the focus of the advantage of the software is really looking at the competitive advantage, the ability to offer higher quality output, higher quality print than the competition. And what we see there is that the quality gain that you will get with Elpical is often higher than any kind of investment in specific screening methods such as FM screening or specific higher quality equipment that you might have. We will also have a look at pricing, and this is obviously just an indication, but I think that it is important to mention that when we say that price is important, that one single license of Claro Premedia is at 7,000 euros. There is a yearly support and maintenance contract that is mandatory at 1,400. So for a base configuration, you will end up spending 8,400 euros, obviously without installation and training, but you'll see that it will be very hard to find any competitor that is able to level that price. I think this is an important part to mention if we look at the current market situation for Claro. As 4Ps, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we have been working with this solution for quite a number of years. And we have, in the beginning, in the early years, certainly encountered a significant amount of skepticism when it comes to the possibility to automate image enhancement. Today, we see that that is not an issue anymore. I think that the simple demonstration of the software convinces people that Claro does an extremely good job at automatically enhancing the quality of the images, and that the quality is also up to a level that amazes people even today. We also have, from a reference point of view, a significant number of publishers that prove this every day, that are using Claro in their current production environment. We also see that Claro is becoming more and more known, and that when a company looks at an image optimization solution, that typically Claro is at least in the top 3 of the contenders. And we also see that each version, each major upgrade of Claro has further increased the out-of-the-box quality, with less need for actually tweaking any of the settings and going through any kind of trial and error process to find the right quality of the solution. I will not open for questions. However, I will go into a demo, hopefully demonstrating to you what the software can do. So we have here a very simple control panel that allows you to start and stop the Claro service. You're also able to access the user interface for configuration from here. Before I go actually into that, what I would like to do is actually process a number of images and show to you what that base quality is, and also show to you how the interaction with the Photoshop inspector works. So here we have the Photoshop inspector right here. You see a number of additional informations that you can get from here. So you will see channel information, the actual name of the image. You will see potentially an additional message. You will find processing information and special instructions that can allow communication between the layout department and the color department, or the image operator specifically. Once images are processed, this next button will start blinking, and by simply clicking that, I will open the image in Photoshop, the original image and the processed image side by side, and I can have a look at the quality of those images. Now, I need to say that I am running this not on the most performant computer. I am running this on a simple MacBook Air with 4 GB of RAM. So as long as the images are processing, you will see some latency in the performance of my system. But at least you will be able to see some images being processed here. So as I mentioned, here you will see the channel that is being used. You will find the name of the original image, and you will see all the processing information there as well. We will have the image fully load so that you can fully see the result of that. So you clearly see that the sky has been cleared out. This blurry part is actually some of the latency that I originally mentioned, but you'll see that the level of detail here in the part of the image that has been completely rendered clearly shows more detail. I will move on to a next image, and also here, if you look at that clock, for instance, and I will move around in the image a little bit more, you certainly see a lot of more detail come out of the image after processing. I'll actually take you to some of the darker areas. We see here in the brick wall, and now the image has been rendered completely. In the brick wall, significantly more detail come out of there. So here with that original and processed image, what I could do is I could still choose for what reason I might have that the original image still is better. And I can perform any correction on there with the tools that I have in Photoshop, and then simply hit the original button. Then it is the original image that will be taken further in the workflow for further processing. I can do exactly the same on the processed image. So if I was to do a very blunt type of correction here like this, then any type of correction that I will do will be taken into account, and it is the image with the additional correction that actually will be taken further into the workflow. Yeah. I also have a queue here, and that queue allows me to get an overview of all the images that are waiting for inspection for me. Yeah, I have all these different images. I see the original name, the channel by which they have been processed, and any of the potential quality warnings or other messages that are in there. So when I see the quality warning, I also get more information on the type of quality warning. So this is a noisy image according to the software. So I can have a closer look at that image and see how much of that noise is really becoming disturbing. We do indeed see some noise in there, but generally speaking, we can say that Claro has done a pretty good job reducing the noise as much as possible, and getting the most detail out of the image. We'll once again use the processed image and go into another image here. So here we see the clear color correction on the wood. We see the level of detail in that rifle and how that has nicely come out. Here we can take some additional examples here, where in the scarf, for instance, we see a significant increase once again in the level of detail. This is a very bad quality image once again. I have deliberately not taken the nicest images, but you'll still see that Claro tries to be the least destructive as possible in the corrections that it makes, still getting the most quality out of the image that is possible. And you'll see that with some better quality images, obviously the results are also significantly better in there. Right, and I'll take you to that last image, the image that you've also seen in the presentation. So this is the type of result that you will get with using just the default settings. I've used the default channel, so there's nothing that I've tweaked in that channel. What we can do is we can go have a look at those settings immediately. What I'll do first before I go into that is I'll show you the integration with InDesign, the InDesign job client. So I will open a document right here. Once I install the Claro job client, you will see this additional menu appear in InDesign, and I can go to my preferences. Here in my preferences, I can connect to the server, and I can define the default channel that I want to use for processing the images. Here I have selected the newspaper channel. I mentioned during the presentation that Claro can use cropping. You can apply actually hard cropping or soft cropping just for image analysis. So I'll have a look at this image here. Hopefully you can see through the webinar that I have actually a picture that is significantly larger than the image box that I have actually used. When I say that I want to apply hard cropping, then that image will be cropped to the size of the image box. I could also choose soft cropping for image analysis, and then the image will stay at the size that it is now. However, it will use only, the Claro Premedia will only use the crop box of this image box for the actual analysis and the improvement of the image. I can rename the images obviously as well. And then I can go into the actual enhancement of the image. Here I can choose to only add the selected images or all images on this page, or use actually all the images in this document. I can here alter the specific channel that I want to process these images with, and I can also send an image, a message to the inspector. We've seen that in the inspector here there is a message box. This will actually allow somebody who is in the page layout department to say, please prioritize this image, or can you make a specific color correction, make the sky blue, and this will actually allow some communication between the page layout department and the image processing department. I will not use this option now, because actually I just want to automatically process the images that I have selected here. So I will choose all the images in this document. I will add them to the queue, and I will actually start the processing here. So now these images, they are being sent to Claro for further optimization. While that is happening in the background, I'd like to take you through the actual user interface and the configuration. So I can go to the Claro application and select the user interface here. So this is the main configuration user interface of Claro. I see my different channels here, and I can create different groups in those channels. Here are my default channels, but I have also custom channels for support or for customer testing that allows me to organize the different channels that I have. One of the questions that we often get is, to which extent is there a limitation on the amount of channels that you can configure in Claro? There is none. The only limitation, as I mentioned during the presentation, is the number of simultaneous processes that is in one license limited to 4, but it is really independent on the amount of channels that I have. So I can have as many channels as I want. There will be 4 images that will be processed simultaneously on a first-in, first-out basis. I'll have a look at this specific default channel, and here I see the different categories of a configuration that I can make. On the input side, I can basically define the input hot folder. I can define to support entire folder structures and also scan the subfolders. I can remove empty subfolders if I want to. So anything that is related to the input can be defined here. I can also define a channel priority so that specific publications that have higher priority in my production can be prioritized over others. When it comes to input conversion, this is important to understand as well, is that all the optimization that Claro will do will be done in RGB. So the best thing to do is to feed Claro with the original RGB images. However, should the images already be in CMYK, they can be processed as well. They will be reconverted to RGB. Or if they're also in an other RGB color space, I can here define all the settings for that. We mentioned the fact that there is support for multi-layered files, Photoshop files and TIFF files. We can also define here which of the layers that need to be processed for that. You can have Claro automatically create a compatibility layer, so that will be an additional layer with all the flattened with all the layers flattened into one layer on top of the layers that are already in the image. And you can process that image keeping all the other layers intact. However, you could also select basically any of the layers that would make sense to you, whether that is the top one, the bottom one, the one with a specific name, or just the layer 0. When it comes to size, we can change the resolution, we can resample, we can upsample, we can define specific columns, specific widths or specific heights according to either the columns that I have in my publication. But this is also a functionality that can be used, for instance, to create different versions of an image that will be used on a website. If I have a classified ads website, or if I have a real estate website, then I can basically create a thumbnail image, a somewhat larger image, and then a full-scale image automatically, and optimize each image in the size that it will be used at. So all of that can be used as well. All those are also applications for Claro. It is not only in a print environment that this can be used. Any kind of web environment or multi-channel environment will benefit significantly also from creating the different versions of the image. When we look at the quality check, we can choose to reject bad images or not. And this is actually a setting that then further will be used in the workflow section that we'll come to later on. So I can choose to reject bad images, and I can choose to reject them on different parameters. I can choose not to reject on color balance, remain relatively flexible on color balance, or be very strict on color balance, and do that for brightness, for sharpness, or for noise. I can also look at the input color space and the output color space and reject an image if more than 30% of the images are out of the colors are out of gamut when converted to the output color space. I can also reject images on the resize factor. So if an image has been placed in an editorial system or in InDesign in combination with the Claro job client, and the image has been scaled up by more than a factor 2, I can reject that image as well. As I mentioned, there's different ways of handling CMYK files. Obviously, you can optimize the CMYK images as well, and then they will first be converted to RGB. But I can also reject CMYK images and have them sent to an image operator to have a look at. One of the logics in a workflow could be that a CMYK image is a finalized image and therefore does not need any further corrections. Typically in publications with advertisements in there, that would be one logic to apply, where the images in the actual advertisements should not be retouched anymore because they are final images. In that sense, if those images are already in CMYK, you could either reject them or not treat them at all. When it comes to workflow, here we really have the setup of how automatically do I want to, how automated do I want my workflow to be. I can process all the images and save them to an output folder. That is the fully automatic mode in which Claro can work. I can send the rejected images to the inspector. So based on the quality check that I've done here, I can send those images that did not pass the quality check to the inspector. I could also simply save the rejected images to an unprocessed folder, so to any kind of folder, not have them sent to the inspector. If I am typically dealing with high quality work, then I might want to review all the images that are being processed by Claro, and I can send all the images to the inspector if I desire to do so. Here we come to the image enhancement part. And this is where I mentioned that in the presentation that the approach that Claro takes is significantly different than what some people are used to from within Photoshop. What we will define here is not the amount of increase in sharpness or in brightness, but it is the level of quality that we would like to achieve. And the value 0 here is actually average quality. So if I don't want to apply unsharp masking, then I unselect the sharpness tick box. When I want to analyze and potentially improve the sharpness, then I will select it, and then 0 will be my default value. This means that if I have a very unsharp image, that sharpness will be applied, even though that value is 0. And if I have already quite sharp images, that there will be no sharpness applied, no additional sharpness applied necessarily. And this goes for these different settings. So it goes for the brightness, for the contrast, and for the saturation. It also goes for the noise and the local contrast. I can set the black point and the white point, or only the black or only the white point. And as I mentioned, we can also apply a noise filter on noisy images, and we can apply local contrast either for shadows and or for highlights. This local contrast setting is typically to get the most detail out of both the highlights and the shadows. This is typically an action that in Photoshop you would only be able to perform by masking specific zones of the image. Here it will apply a specific contrast for those different lighting conditions that you will find back in one picture. If I take the color balance setting, then I will neutralize the images. And I will remove any color cast that I will find back in those images. So those are the generic image enhancements. Then there's also additional image enhancements specifically for specific color tones. First of all, there is the red eye removal. So Claro has also a face recognition technology built in that will enable red eyes to be removed if obviously I tick that setting. And to avoid any kind of potential misidentification of red eyes, I could also only apply that filter when a flash is being used according to the EXIF data, so according to the metadata that is embedded in the image. The strength will basically have an impact on the amount of colors that are considered the red of red eyes, and you'll see that come back in all the other settings as well, the skin tones, the green tones, and the blue tones. That strength slider will have its impact on the gamut of colors that is being affected by this correction. Going into the skin tones, here I have a little bit more of an elaborate adjustment that I can make. Red eyes, obviously I only want to remove them or not. With skin tones, with green tones and blue tones, I want to have a little bit more influence. First of all, I can define the tone. Do I want warmer skin tones or cooler skin tones? The strength, as I just mentioned, will apply the setting on a larger or smaller range of colors. And then I can also apply specific saturation or brightness on skin tones. Yeah, so I can have more saturated skin tones or brighter skin tones as I desire. The same goes for greens and for blues. The specific applications for this are obvious. Anything that is apologies. Anything that is natural greens, grass, trees, things like that. You might want to have specific corrections on that. The same for blues. If I have a blue sky or a sea or a lake, then I might want to have specific adjustments for that. And I can make those adjustments right here. There are a number of settings related to PDF. I will not go into too much detail about those. Basically, they will avoid to process images that are not really to be considered real images. I might have bitmap images, bitmap logos in there that are not really images, but that Claro could identify as being images. In order to avoid those elements in the PDF to be processed, I can tweak a number of settings here to avoid that. Um, uh, to a certain extent, still important because PDF will quite regularly apply lossy compression like JPEG on images that are embedded in the PDF. I could choose to use zip compression here before reinserting those back into the PDF. So to avoid additional quality loss due to the lossy compression that is being used. One interesting setting as well for a different type of application is that I could extract all the images from a PDF into a folder. So if I receive a PDF that I need to process, but then I would like to repurpose the images for other types of publications or for repurposing on a website, then I could easily extract those images out of the PDF into a separate folder and use them for those other purposes. When it comes to output conversion, here I will define the ICC profile that is being used for the output conversion. I can do that for color images and for black and white images. I can define the rendering intent that is being used in specific cases. The standard rendering intent that is being used is perceptual. However, if a specific percentage of colors is out of gamut, that I could choose, for instance, what is being frequently used, the relative colorimetric with black point compensation rendering intent. I can embed the profile into the output file and some additional settings with regards to that. There is an additional setting that I hope that I will be able to show you. Yep. I can also apply compensation curves. Now, this goes a little bit against the philosophy of the software, where obviously we want to do a dynamic color correction or a dynamic correction and image enhancement on this image, on all the images. Here, if we want to, you could apply a more linear color correction, and you could say, you know, I want to apply a specific compensation curve on a specific channel. This would be if, for instance, I would want to compensate for a specific dominant paper tone or anything like that. We already come to the output, where we obviously define the output folder. I can have a backup destination folder. This can be for different purposes. The output folder could, for instance, be a network drive, and if for any reason whatsoever the computer is not connected to the network anymore, then I can define that backup destination folder. I can define a file format of the output. I can choose the original file format, so then the file format will be exactly the same. But I can also define a specific file format: JPEG, TIFF, Photoshop, EPS, GIF, and PNG with the specific JPEG compression that I want to use. Going a little bit more into detail into multi-layered files once again, so Photoshop files or TIFF files with multiple layers in there, or not necessarily even multiple layers already in there. What I can do is I can have a file that has only one layer in there, but then keep the original as layer and keep the processed as layer, and create a multi-layered file in which I have the original and the processed image as separate layers in the file. This would allow me to take certain parts of the original layer and certain parts of the processed image and combine them into one image. Once again, that will involve some manual work still, but it might significantly increase the time that is being spent on an image. As I said, I can keep the original layers, all of the original layers, or I could only create, keep those layers that contain any kind of masking or alpha channels. When we go into some of the more detailed metadata options, specifically when it comes to XMP, we can add channel settings to the XMP data. We can add all the processing information to the XMP information. We can add inspector settings to XMP. So we can actually add all of those settings into the file. And if I have an automated workflow that uses that metadata, I can specifically use those processing that processing information to further automate my routing of images and further potential processing of those images. I can give the file a prefix or an extension. I can give a specific extension to grayscale images, and obviously if I had a folder structure on input, I can now also mirror that same folder structure with different subfolders on the output side. I can send the image also to an FTP destination. If I select that, I simply have to put in the login credentials of the FTP server, and I'll be done. In the advanced section, there's a specific element that I would like to show you, where obviously we can strip all the metadata out of the image and make the image lighter. Sometimes dragging along all the metadata can make the image file very heavy, so we can strip that all out of there. But one of the things that I specifically wanted to show you is that we can also add a watermark to the image. And obviously we have to choose the path of the image that we want to use as a watermark. Then we define what the part of that image is, what the transparency is, what the position is, and what the color is. But this is a very simple way of automating the addition of a watermark onto my images. So that's the channel, the processing channel, the image processing channel that I can create. As mentioned during the presentation, I have another type of channel that is a routing channel on the input side that has obviously all of the same settings that we've just seen in the image processing channel. And then what you will do is you will actually define a number of conditions in a simple if then else structure. So if the IPTC field X contains something, then route the image to a specific channel. But this goes also for XMP information, for the color space, for the embedded profile, the file name extension, the size of the image, the orientation of the image, or the fact that it has multiple layers. So based on all that information, I can say, or any of that information, I can say, route it to a specific processing channel, and should it not correspond to any of those conditions, then you can send it to another channel as well. So that is that. That gives you a quick overview of the different settings in Claro. I'll quickly take you through the different tabs here. Here I get a full overview of the activity on the server. So I see which image has been processed when and what are the corrections that have been made to it. If I have specific errors in the server, I can view those here. I have a monitor where I can see how many images are still up for processing in any of the different channels. Here I can download the inspector application to my local workstation, but I can also see which images are still waiting to be inspected by any of the operators. And here I can schedule the different channels. So I can set a channel to be active at a certain time, between certain times, and also have the images sent to the inspector or not, independently on what we've defined in the actual channel. So I could here define that a specific channel that would normally reroute images to the inspector to eliminate that rerouting after a certain hour. Typically after office hours when people have gone home, if I'm not in a multi-shift environment. So that's Claro. I will actually quickly go back once more to InDesign, because what has happened in the meantime, I sent those images for optimization to Claro, and then I got into the demo of the settings. What I can actually do here is I can toggle between the different images, and you will immediately see that they have been optimized. Here they have been processed with the newspaper channel, so obviously they have become a lot clearer. But I can select one of those images, and then by simply tapping on the space bar of my keyboard, I can toggle between the original image and the processed image. So I can see the before and after right from within InDesign. So that's it from my end. I hope that it was educational. I'm not sure if there's any question. So one of the question is, does the Photoshop Inspector show proof conditions as per original Photoshop? Meaning, will it use the profile and the paper simulation? You can choose to, that is one of the settings that you can define. I'll quickly show that to you when it goes into the workflow. In the workflow here, I can define that I apply the output conversion before the inspector. Here it was only defined to apply the output conversion on the processed image, but I can do that also for the original image. Also here, this is a workflow choice. There are people that prefer to see the original image as such. Obviously, if you want to get a better feeling of the actual enhancement that has been done by Claro, except for the pure color conversion, then typically you would want to activate this option as well and have the original and the processed image being color converted and look at those. Are there any correction settings for darker skin tones was one of the other questions. Yes. I think I have gone. I think I have shown that, and I'll go through that quickly again. Here in the color sections, in the skin tones, basically I can define brightness specifically on skin tones. I'm not sure if I understood that question correctly, but here I can define the lightness or the brightness of the skin tones. When it comes to different origins of people and skin tones of different parts of the world, we see that typically this tone adjustment will do the trick. To give a very specific example, one of the things that we notice out of in practice is that typically Europeans want to look a little bit darker than they actually are. They want to have a tanned appearance. And obviously you can play around with that tone adjustment to do that. And with some of our customers in India, typically they want to look a little bit paler. Those adjustments with that tone adjustment can be performed. What is the hardware requirements? Well, typically you need a modern system and typical server infrastructure, because so any kind of multi-processor or multi-core environment is recommended. We are looking at typically a system with 4 cores or more to take full advantage of the 4 simultaneous processes that the Elpical license is able to handle. As a minimum, we recommend 16 gigabytes of RAM. So that is from the working memory side, and then disk I/O is very important. Every image that has to be processed has to be read and has to be written. So the disk performance has a significant impact on the overall performance of the solution. That means that we recommend either a 10,000 RPM hard drive, if not a solid state drive, if that's at all a capability. Obviously, that's not a true requirement. As I said, I was running this on my MacBook Air, so it runs basically on very simple infrastructure as well. But the more performant the infrastructure it is, the more that you will be able to take advantage of the power of the software as well. Should you want to redo this demo on a one-on-one basis, I'd be happy to take that up with you. If you have any questions, as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the simplest way would be to send those to support@4ps.com, and we'll be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. That's it from my end. A very good day to you, and I hope to see you at one of our upcoming webinars. Thank you.